It is equally a pleasure to speak with you today, sir. Since it dropped last Wednesday, my dad has texted me literally every single day to see if I'd watched it yet because Bill Russell was one of his true heroes. And, we're talking about a 76-year-old guy from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who really doesn't care much about professional sports. But if I could count the number of times he's talked to me about the rivalry with Bill and Wilt and, the way he revolutionized defense and everything you brought to the story. And then once I finally watched it, we were able to have this conversation that uh, gave us new things to talk about. So thank you for
My
making this
pleasure.
film.
My pleasure.
Yeah, well, let's jump in. So with us today is the incredible award-winning director, editor, professor, and professional storyteller behind many films, but most recently Bill Russell Legend on Netflix. Hello, Sam Pollard. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you today?
Very good. So I was thinking as a way into this, and for storytellers and the stories they tell, context is everything, right? You can't just look at Bill Russell and talk only about what he did on the court, which was unparalleled. And similarly, I don't think we can look at this film as just a sports doc about one of the goats. We have to take in the context of what's around it. And Bill Russell was an athlete and an activist during such incredible times, and you are a storyteller whose unique lens has been brought to so many important figures, and I think it's that lens that elevates the story and the film. So, can how did you come to bring your lens, your perspective to a figure like Bill Russell?
Well, first of all, I want to say that it was Ross Greenberg who reached out to me about 2 years ago and asked if I was interested in directing this documentary, which was initially going to be like a 4 or 5 part series about Bill. And I was no hesitation on my part. I had grown up in the 60s. Like your dad, I had seen Bill Russell play against Wilt. I knew about him. I knew about his reputation as one of the great defensive centers of all time. In my neighborhood, we would have this dialogue: who was the best center? Was it Wilt Chamberlain? Was it Bill Russell? And I always went for Bill Russell because just offensively, you could see what he could do on the court. And he was leading the Celtics to become a dynasty. I mean, this guy had 11 rings, 13 seasons, just unthinkable nowadays in sports. So it was like, this was something I wanted to dig into. And the thing I hadn't really known so much about was how active Bill was off the court. I knew about his exploits on the court, and I knew a little bit about him. I always think about the picture of him at the 67 Summit with Jim Brown and Kareem, Ali, and all the other, sports figures. But I didn't really know about, him going down to Jackson, Mississippi after Medgar Everest's death. I didn't know his involvement with bust and Boston issues in Massachusetts. I didn't know about the fact that he was at the March on Washington. That I didn't know, so it was all these fascinating things about Bill that came to light as we started to do the research and dig into the material. And there were so many books about Bill, plus his 2 memoirs, Going for Glory and Second Wind. These were ways to look at Bill from a very interior perspective, because you could see from the excerpts we used, this guy was always constantly thinking about himself, not only as a basketball player, but as an African-American male in America at this pretty turbulent time in American history. I mean, you see him talking about his feelings about Dr. King, his feelings about Malcolm X, his feelings about Vietnam. He was just more than a guy who would just shut up and dribble. He was a real thinker. And I think the thing that, was important to me as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, is your word about me, was to really look at Bill from all dimensions, not just look at him as just a sports figure, but as a figure who said, I have a responsibility, to speak out and speak up about things that I see wrong in America. And then that's what makes it special. And the other thing about him too is that he was also kind of an ordinary guy, had a chip on his shoulder. He was a complicated guy, like many of us are. And most times when you see sports figures, you only see the one side. We felt it was important that you see all the shades of Bill Russell.
Right. I feel today, maybe we take for granted the ability to speak up, to say something, to stand up for what is right. And I think what was most impactful to me in watching the film is he did that at a time when it was dangerous to do so, not just, professionally for his career, but for his
Personally,
life
absolutely.
personally. I mean, getting the context of what happened to him and his house in Reading and all of those stories. I mean, I think to be a little ornery is putting it mild, right? If that were to happen to me or to anyone for whatever context, it would leave a chip on your shoulder, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that he has the humility and grace to keep on and to keep talking about it and to be at the same time this almost gregarious figure. I know he wasn't always, but you hear that laugh, and I'm so happy that you included that in the film. I mean, he did seem like a fun guy who brought a lot of love to the room, right? He had a lot of light.
Well, you can tell in that whole movie footage that we see the Celtics, having a good time and partying, that he loved being a Celtic. If there's anything that you can have no question about, he loved being a Celtic. He loved being with his
Absolutely.
teammates. He loved winning games. But as he said, he didn't love Boston. He didn't love Boston fans, but he loved being a
Right.
Celtic. And I think that's for him. That was the thing that kept him engaged and excited about the game. And I think, like anything, wear and tear probably just got to him in the last couple of years. But you can tell by 67, 68, Bill had got psychically weary, physically weary. He knew it was time with, so it had to be a surprise for his teammates and the city of Boston when he walked away from the game after the 69 finals against the Los Angeles Lakers. But I think he knew that it was time for him to explore some different avenues. So
Yeah.
I found that really a kind of an amazing thing that he walked away from the Celtic organization. He walked away from the city of Boston, and he walked away from his family, Tracy. That's really crazy. That was pretty impactful.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that, what was this other side to him that he was looking for? He had
You were
accomplished all
obviously
these.
searching. Yeah, he was obviously
Yeah,
searching. You
right.
get up and you drive all the way west looking for a new life. You know,
Yeah.
that's what he did.
He had to have carried a great weight. Well, you've certainly covered many historical, culturally, socially important figures in your work. For those who aren't familiar, MLK, FBI, Arthur Ashe, Eyes on the Prize. Can you tell our audience a little bit about how you first came to be a storyteller and what drew you to it?
Well, it was really happenstance, man. I was a young 21-year-old going to City College in New York City, majoring in business. And clearly I wasn't happy in these classes I was taking at the time. So I went to see a counselor. I told her I was looking for an internship, something to do after school. And she asked me what were my interests. And I said, I love books and I loved old Hollywood. Tracy. I loved old Hollywood. I just grew up watching, you know, Kirk Douglas, Ava Gardner. I just loved it. So she told me about a workshop that had been started by the public television station in New York City, WNET, in 1968 after Dr. King's assassination. They started this workshop to get more people of color behind the camera, in the editing room, writing, producing, doing sound. It was a 1-year program. Professionals would come in and teach you how to shoot, how to edit, how to write scripts, how to do sound. I got into the program. I gravitated to the editing, and they taught me how to edit. So by the end of that 1-year program, I had edited some of the films from the workshop. I got a job on a low budget feature film, mostly all black crew. But the editor, who was this white Jewish gentleman named Victor Koneski, took me under his wing and he introduced me to the world of documentary and documentary storytelling. And the rest is history, man.
Wow. Wow, what a great story. And how did you come to work with Spike Lee?
It was 1987. I was working my first directorial job on Eyes on the Prize. And I was living in Boston. And one day I had my 2 sons with me. One was 10, the other was 2, my oldest son, Jason. The phone rang and he picked up the phone, and Spike Lee's film, Do the Right Thing, had just come out in theater. My son picked up the phone that day and said, Jason, I said, Dad, Spike Lee's on the phone. And I initially said, George, Jason, don't pull my leg. I mean, I just seen the movie in the theater. Spike Lee's calling me. But sure enough, it was Spike Lee. And one of his producers was a friend of mine. And he was getting ready to, his next film was going to be Mo Better Blues with Denzel Washington about jazz music. And my friend, this producer, told Spike I was a real jazz aficionado. I love jazz. And that would be a good fit for this film. So he asked if I was interested in editing, and I turned him down the first time. And, I said I was busy trying to finish Unknown Prize. I wasn't going to be available. Thank you for calling. I hung up the phone, man. 2 months later, another filmmaker who was working with Spike recommended me also to cut my post. Spike called me again. We ended up meeting at Martha's Vineyard, Labor Day, 1988. I took the film. That's how it began.
Playing hard to get. Excuse me. Excuse me 1 second, Sam. I just realized I don't have my headphones, and I want to make sure the echo doesn't come across. Sorry about that. That's incredible.
Yeah. I wasn't, at the time, Tracy,
All right, there we go.
I didn't think I was playing hard to get. I was worried about trying to do 2 films at once.
Yeah, no, you had your priorities right. If you're going to direct something, you got to direct it. That's a full-time job. That's actually a good segue. I wanted to ask. I mean, having worn both hats as an editor and a director, and I think I've noticed on the films you've directed, you typically don't edit them.
That's right.
What would you say the similarities and the differences are between the roles, and how come you bring in somebody else to have that, objectivity?
Here's the big difference from editing to directing. When you're editing, you really get into the minutia of every shot, every frame, every bite, every interview, And what you're also doing is you're taking material that someone else has shot, and then you're looking at it through your prism. As a director, I'm the one who has to create the material, shoot the interviews, figure out the material I need to give to the end, create the film. I used to think when I first directed it was going to be easy because I used to complain that, these directors don't know what they're doing. But it was very hard to realize that I had to go out now and figure out the questions to ask, where to shoot the interviews, what kind of footage I needed in terms of, complimentary footage. What should the story be? I had to be thinking about all those things and then turn that over to an editor, So that was a big difference. And the reason that I don't edit my own stuff is because when you direct your own material, it's really hard to think about it beyond the process of just directing. By bringing in a good editor, someone who's going to bring a different perspective on it, it's going to inform how you've been thinking about material, and sometimes bring things to it that you didn't think about and elevate it to a level that you didn't think about. There's some of these films that I directed now where, I'll be honest with you, Tracy, sometimes I'll be editors I give the material to, they'll do things better than I thought I might have done it as an editor. So I'm jealous, but the other part of me is happy because they're making my film better.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we all wrestle with our egos,
Exactly.
and think we know best, but you always want to have the humility to be able to step aside and recognize best idea wins. Which, interesting parallel to Bill Russell, right? And his
Exactly.
rivalry with Will. I mean,
because he knew
Bill knew he was. Yeah.
He knew he could never outpoint, Will Chamberlain. He could not really completely out-rebound Will Chamberlain, but he was able to kind of throw him off his game, so that it enabled his teammates on the Celtics to get the ball, go down the court to get the shot. And as you can tell, as you know, statistically, Bill Russell was a winner. Was he physically better player than Will Chamberlain? No. Will Chamberlain, 7'2", probably got 30 pounds on 6'9" Bill Russell. Bill Russell had to try to contain him to a degree where he could get the ball under a certain rebound and get it to his team. The fact that he was a team player helped to elevate his game. And Will, statistically we know, Will Chamberlain was not a team player. He was not a team player. He was a star, You know, I mean, here's a guy
He
who
was going to
scored.
get his.
He was going to get his.
Yeah.
He got his
Yeah.
100. Remember
Ross
when he got?
just mentioned, I think
Uh,
something Bill told him at some point was Bill knew that if Wilt got 50 points or more, Celtics were going to win the game
that's right.
because that
Because
meant that Wilt was forcing the issue. He wasn't finding his teammates.
that's right. He wasn't the finest teammate. You know,
Right.
that's why he was. That's why he was the player that he was. Now we all know Will Chamberlain was a great player, but was he a great teammate? Not really. You
Right.
know, and then
Right.
when the Lakers start, and think of it this way, you have the big three in Los Angeles, 1969: Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Will Chamberlain. Those guys, as Jerry West said in the film, they were a better team than the Celtics. You know, statistically, they were a better team. The thing that the Celtics had was this, you know, they physically were, you know, they were all the guys who were near the end of their career. You know, Casey, you know, Sam Jones was going to retire. You know, Tommy Hodge had long ago retired. They weren't physically a great team that year, but there was, you know, the game of any sport is not just about what you do physically, how you handle it mentally, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what Bill Russell's issue with Will Chamberlain was like, even though Wilt had been hurt, it's like, remember when Willis Reed got hurt against the Knicks, when he played for the Knicks, and he came
Yep.
out limping? Leadership. He showed leadership. And so when you show leadership, your teammates rally. So Bill Russell's issue with Wilt was stay in the game. You would have shown leadership to your teammate.
Right. And that caused a real rip in their friendship.
Yeah. Because he wasn't playing like a teammate. He was playing like an individual. I'm hurt.
Right.
Even though he wanted to come back, you know, I mean, this other player says he wanted to come back in the game. But Van Vanderkolk said, you know, fuck Will.
Yeah. No, that was crazy. You know, some of the sequences I love most in the series with the way you were able to shine a light on his intellect and his creativity. I never knew his passion for painting and how
Oh,
you
yeah.
were able to draw those parallels to how it informed how we saw basketball. And then the way that he and Casey Jones brought a whole new geometry, math, angles to revolutionizing how defense was played in the NBA.
Yeah. So it wasn't just about getting the rebound. You know, it was about thinking about when you get the rebound, where to position yourself to get the ball to your teammate, how to move the other player around, you know, on the other team. So you have a better position when your teammate can get the shot. I mean, this, you know, it's like you realize how scientific, you know, the game sports are. I mean, it's just not taking the ball, run down the court, getting the shot, getting the rebound. It's much more than that, you know.
Right.
And when you understand that, that's what makes these games so exciting. I mean, think about that Super Bowl on Sunday, man. You know, the Chiefs, strategic, they're smart. I mean, and the Eagles were in those slumps. They were a great
Yeah,
team.
number one defense, but that second half, you looked at both those touchdowns. Where was the containment? You know, how does
Yeah,
a number one defense let a guy score a touchdown twice where there wasn't a player within 10 yards?
that's right.
You know, and that's Bieniemy, that's Andy Reid, and that's Mahomes. They
Yeah,
saw something that the Eagles didn't realize they were doing.
yeah,
But yeah, it's why Tom Brady's been able to do what he's done for so long. Peyton Manning winning the Super Bowl late in life, and Bill Russell and that Celtics team, you know,
that's
winning
right.
their 11th when it didn't look like they should. And yet, at the same time, and I want to transition here, you know, I imagine if you ask Bill Russell, those are just games, right? That's not life. And
Well,
I
that's
think
right. I mean, you know,
and
when
what
you're
you brought to the film, showing that responsibility that he felt he had to do what is right, I think is the really impactful thing. And it's what I'm most interested in talking about you, because in preparation for this, I did watch MLK. And I mean, wow, what just a powerful story that I hadn't heard. You know,
well,
I
that's
obviously knew the struggles, but to have that brazen an agenda to say this is the most dangerous Negro in the country, what can we do to take him down? Uh,
and when you think about that, basically, isn't that like amazing? He was a guy who was about nonviolence and peace, you know, and you're looking at him as the most dangerous Negro in America. It's like appalling. Anything,
Right.
appalling.
It's an
But the
uncomfortable truth, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That the
that's
people
right.
who were in charge didn't want things to change. And in Boston, right? I'm sure if you ask fans in Boston in the 60s, are you racist? No, we're not racist. We just don't want
That's
them
right.
near us.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, the thing that I always find great about doing these documents is it gives me the ability to dig deep into a person and to and the context in terms of where they lived and what was happening socially, and when I have an opportunity to do an Arthur Ashe or Bill Russell or Martin Luther King, I'm looking to see if I can make sure that you dig into these people, into the world they lived in at the time, to show how complicated things were. And our life is always complicated. It's never black and white life. That's one of the challenges I always am looking forward to trying. So,
Yeah. And then that's, I think it seems from your work, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that there is a responsibility of being a filmmaker as well. Just as Russell
yeah.
felt he had a responsibility off the court, it seems that you tell me. You're a professor as well. What do you teach your kids? Right? What do you want to send your students out into the world? Um,
Well, that's
how do you help them find their voice?
exactly what you just said. It's about the responsibility that you take on as a filmmaker. You try to tell stories that are going to ring true. They're going to be as true as possible, be complicated, you know. And a long time ago, I worked with a filmmaker named St. Clair Bond, who said to me very clearly and very blunt that you have a responsibility, not just to make films to make money. If I wanted to make money enough, I could have stayed in feature, but to make films that can have an impact, that's going to open up a window to another, and another look at American history from another perspective, you know, and hopefully engage audiences and force audiences to say, "Oh, American history is much more than just George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's people like August Wilson, it's like Sammy Davis, like like Bill Russell." So that is a responsibility I took on seriously at the age of 32, 33. And I try to still live up to that with all the films that I'm attached to. I thought it.
That's impressive. And that's great, right? That's
Right.
that's that's your legacy.
I hope so. And I pass
Mm.
it on to one of my son, who's also in it.
Oh, he is. What does he do?
He's an editor and a director.
Did you insist that he started as an editor first?
No, I think he just saw me do it and he decided to he wanted to emulate. I got to say, I'm very proud of him. He just finished a documentary about Louis Armstrong. It was a full plus.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I heard of that. I have not seen it yet. I
Yeah,
will
yeah,
I will check it out.
right.
Well, what's up next for you? What are you working on if you can talk about it?
Yeah, I have a documentary that's going to be premiering at South by Southwest in next month. It's about the jazz musician, drummer from the period of bebop to the present named Max Roach, who was a drummer who played with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk, Clifford Brown. And it's a film that took me almost 30 years to get finished, but I finally finished with a co-director. And I'm very proud of it. And then I have a film coming out in the summer about the Negro Baseball League, Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige, which will be a theatrical feature film about the Negro Leagues and how it built, grew, and it lost its momentum when Jackie Robinson integrated the thing.
I look forward to that. I'm sure that will be fascinating.
Yeah.
Are there any other holy grail projects you've pitched in the past that you wish had gone, or things? You said you worked on this Max Roach for 30 years. I mean,
Long
that's
time.
quite the white whale journey there.
It was a white whale, man. I'm always trying to develop some other stuff. I'm trying to develop a documentary about this African American man who went to the Congo named George Washington Williams. I'm trying to develop a documentary about this record company from the 60s called Impulse Records that really sort of built around John Coltrane's musical legacy. I'm always trying to find projects that are going to stimulate me, forced me to investigate American history from a different light.
I love that. And that's extremely important, right? Is
Absolutely.
a quick example. I grew up, as I mentioned, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I had first heard of the Tulsa race riots, and I have to phrase that way because that's how it was. I won't even say taught, but how I first heard about it.
Yeah,
Almost in these like Trumpian terms of like, well, there's good folks on both sides.
that's right.
And I remember my wife and I were watching The Watchmen, the scripted HBO series,
HBO, yeah.
and the pilot
Yep,
had, giant special effects, planes overhead dropping bombs on Greenwood, the part of town in Tulsa, and everything was blowing up and was destroyed and explosions. And I had to say, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit. And I said, wow, they're really, going Hollywood uh, on this.
yeah.
And as we're watching the rest of the pilot, I bring up my phone as we consume things these days, and I'm going down the rabbit hole, and I'm learning about the Greenwood race riots, and this was before the 100th anniversary a couple years ago. And I'll be damned, it was Black Wall Street. It was a thriving business community, and in one day, it was completely destroyed.
That's exactly
And
right.
that's the town I grew up in,
Yeah.
right? That's a part of town that was 2.5 miles from where I grew up. And I never knew that until I was 40 years old.
Well, now you know.
And now, fortunately, that story has been told. And, with the 100-year anniversary, a lot's happened, but there's a lot of stories like that out there.
Well, think about this. 1991, I did a documentary for the American Experience called Going Back to T-Town about the Tulsa race riot, 1991. And the other thing is, one of the seminal R&B bands from that period, the musicians, was called the Gap Band. And the Gap
I've heard of
Band,
Gap Band.
3 guys from Tulsa, they lived, the Gap Band was Greenwood, Archer, and Pine.
I
Three
never knew
streets,
that.
3 streets in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy world, right? And we have to wrestle with it. We have
Oh
to
yeah,
reconcile these parts of our history
that's right.
that we're not proud of, but unless you face them head on, you're doomed to repeat yourself.
Exactly. So where are you now? Where are you based now?
Oh, yeah, outside of New York, Westchester,
Oh, where? What town?
Ardsley.
Oh yeah, yeah. I grew up in New York, man. I used to
Oh
live
yeah,
in,
where'd you grow up?
I grew up in East Harlem, but I used to live in Mount Vernon.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
right down the road. Yeah,
my
and Ross as well. I learned was just a
yeah, yeah,
town or two over.
yeah. My boys both
How
went.
did you? Sorry, this is backtracking, and maybe we'll edit it out. But how did you first start working with Ross? Like, how did that relationship come to be?
It came about. It came about through Spike. Ross had Spike do a little short film about Mike Tyson in 1988 when we were doing No Better Blues for HBO Sport. And I edited that for Spike. And that's when I met Ross. And we did another short piece about John Thompson, the Georgetown coach for HBO Sport.
Of course.
And then we did another piece about Cleveland Indian slugger. They were called the Cleveland Indians. Who was it? Jesus. I did that. I think I did 3 short films with Spike for HBO Sports. And that's when I got to know Ross.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
I
and we
think I
did,
heard you mention.
we did Jim Brown
Yeah.
All-American for Ross too.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's right in there too, right? All of these figures you've mentioned:
Oh yeah.
Bill Russell, Jim Brown, Arthur Ashe.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, athletes who were dominant on the field, but maybe
Off
just as
the
dominant
field
off
too.
it.
Exactly.
Right.
Cool.
Wonderful. I'm just seeing if there's anything else here. I did hear you mention in an interview that you were at one time trying to work on something about Reuben Hurricane Carter. Did anything ever come of that?
No, man, we pitched that thing to like 10 streamers from Netflix to HBO. Nobody bid at all. I was surprised. I thought it was going to be a great story. No, it didn't get any legs.
That's shocking, but at the same time, it's not, right? It's the business we're
It's
in.
it's the
There's a
business.
million reasons they say
Yeah.
no, but keep trying, right? It sounds like a no brainer to me. I mean, I think from the Bob Dylan song to the Will Smith movie, it's time someone does the definitive doc about it.
Yeah, it was the Denzel Smith movie, Denzel Washington movie.
Denzel, sorry.
Yeah,
Will
yeah,
was Ali.
yeah, yeah, I think it's a
Got
great
those two
story.
confused. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
you're welcome.
I would love to know more. I'd love to know the real story. I would love it to be in the hands of someone like you to,
Yeah,
to open my eyes to what we're missing about it.
we were trying. We definitely tried, but nobody seemed to go for it. It worked.
Well, maybe I can play my small part, and if somebody listens to this, they'll come calling you up.
Hopefully. Be great. Well, good talking to you.
Excellent. Last couple questions.
Sure.
Dream dinner party. Invite anybody, past, present, alive, not living. Who would it be?
It would be Ali. It would be James Baldwin. And it would be Zora Neale Hurston. They would
I
be
would
at my
love
dinner
to
party.
eavesdrop on that conversation.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, thank you very much. Are there any last words? Anything I forgot to ask? Anything you send your students away with? Parting words of wisdom?
I always tell them that, the film business is not an easy business. It's tough. It's business, and don't expect to get rich. It's rare that you get rich making documentaries. But if you are passionate and committed, you will have a lot of fun. There'll be great ups and sometimes there'll be some downs, but usually the ups are more than down. And I've been doing it this is my 15th year in the business. And I love it as much as I did 50 years ago.
Well, cheers to that. Congratulations, sir. I hope there are many, many more films to come. Any websites? Obviously, everybody check out Bill Russell Legend on Netflix. Anything we should direct them to? Films, websites, social media handles?
Peacock has another documentary that I just co-directed called Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power is playing on Peacock right now. So tell all your friends.
Wonderful.
October on American Masters, the Max Roach document on American
I
Masters.
look forward to
Public
both
television.
of those. Sam,
Yeah.
thank you very much for your time today.
My
Genuinely
pleasure.
appreciate it. Good
Take
luck on
care of
everything.
yourself. Be good. Bye.
Take care.